Greetings, everybody. Chris Hislop here from the Montana World Affairs Council. This is another episode of What, So What, Now What, our international affairs webcast that looks at the issue of the day, and in just 5 short minutes, you become the smartest kid on the block. Today, we're sticking with Ukraine, and we have a very special guest. Anna Conley is an assistant professor at the Alexander Blewett III Law School at the University of Montana. Her areas of expertise include civil litigation, comparative law, international law, and human rights. Anna has a JD from the George Washington Law School and an LLM and Doctor of Civil Laws from the McGill University Faculty of Law. Anna, welcome to the show. How are you?
Hi, Chris. Thank you for having me. I'm good.
Well, thanks a lot, Anna. We've been talking a lot about Ukraine, and the question of international law continues to come up. We thought we'd ask an expert. Could you let us know, what is applicable regarding international law on the situation in Ukraine?
Yeah, thanks, Chris. International law has to coexist with other geopolitical realities and dynamics. And to be honest, we're seeing pretty serious international law violations in Ukraine. As you know, we have violations of the use of force, which is when a country can go into another country and use force in that territory. And we're seeing violations of international humanitarian law with a lot of the actions on the ground in Ukraine with regard to targeting civilians, civilian property, going far and above any sort of necessary military objectives. So those are the two main areas where we're seeing significant international law violations in this current Ukraine crisis.
And when you talk about the impact on civilians, are you talking about the Geneva Conventions? If so, I mean, that's a word we often hear. What is that, and what does that mean in this situation?
Good question. The two big sources of law with regard to use of force are the UN Charter, Article 2.4, and that's when you can or can't go into a country and use force. But you're exactly right. There's the Geneva Conventions of 1949, and then several protocols to those, as well as the 1907 Hague Convention. Those are the building blocks of humanitarian law. They're pretty extensive, and they have a lot of protections for when there is an armed conflict, making sure that you're not targeting civilians, making sure that if you have prisoners of war, for example, they're being treated in a fair way and in a humane way. So it's really trying to avoid unnecessary loss of life and property.
We also hear that there are different areas where international law is practiced, the International Criminal Court, the International Court of Justice, and other bodies. Anna, if these legal actions go ahead, where will they land?
Yeah, it's really, we're seeing the limitations of international law in this conflict because we've seen Ukraine go to the International Court of Justice and get a declaration or seek a declaration that Russia's justification of the intervention under the Geneva, the Genocide Convention, is unjust. And we have an order from the International Court of Justice ordering Russia to withdraw all military forces from Ukraine that Russia is ignoring. We have an order from the European Court of Human Rights, same thing, ordering Russia to not target any civilians or civilian targets. Again, Russia's ignoring that. So we see that there are these attempts to use these international tribunals, but we're not making a lot of progress on the ground today. Then we have an ongoing investigation by the International Criminal Court, the ICC, and assumedly at some point in time, that investigation will lead to indictments. But it's far too early to tell what that process is going to look like. There is inability to prosecute the crime of aggression under the International Criminal Court. So there's also talk about a standalone ad hoc International Criminal Tribunal to deal with the crime of aggression and to hold people accountable with regard to that specific international law violation.
Anna, why are states able to ignore these kinds of legal actions?
Yeah, well, it's sort of different than domestic law, right? If I commit a crime, then I can be arrested, whether I want to be arrested or not, and I can be held involuntarily. But international law doesn't really work that way. We don't have a standing army ready to address international law violations, ready to enforce International Court of Justice orders like we've seen here. Unfortunately, it's a consent-based system, and sovereigns are the direct actors and participants and subjects of international law, and it's pretty hard to tell them what to do.
Thank you very much, Anna Conley, for helping us make some sense of this very complex issue. Anna Conley from the Blewett Law School at the University of Montana, an international law expert. Special thanks also to the Dennis and Phyllis Washington Foundation, Allegiance and Stockman Bank, who help us bring this and so many more programs to you. Anna, thanks again. Have a great day. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Chris.